I'm a guy that's 25. Lego Star Wars is my life. I like Ryan Johnson. I'm Rich Boy J. The first MOC we're going to take a look at is called Patrol on Endor, and it is by, please forgive me at my pronunciation of this, but it looks like Jesse Van Den Oetelaar. Someone in the comment section, please correct me on the correct pronunciation of that. But the MOC, oh my god, this is such a good Endor MOC. Like, if anyone was building an Endor and was like, Jay, give me some insight, give me some help on what I might want to do, like with the different landforms, the trees, the groundwork, the rock work, this is, I think, a perfect MOC to point to. It's a pretty reasonable scale. You know, it's not huge, it's not small, it's kind of, I'd consider this like a mid-sized MOC, but he does so many things well in this build. Let's first start off with just the rock work over to the right side of the build. This is a freeform MOC, so you'd expect to see some of this rock work kind of bleed over to the sides of the build, and I think he integrates it pretty seamlessly. I think that the usage of some of those wedge bricks in dark gray, and there's tons of slopes all throughout this thing. I mean, there's wedge bricks, there's normal slopes. There's also some interesting uses of slopes on the side, some interesting snot work there. There's some curved slopes in there. There is just a lot of different slopes in this little assembly right here, and it all looks very good. I think the little hints of dark green, whether it be the 1x1 plates or the curved slopes themselves, also look nice. And then he tops it all off with those 3 petal flower pieces. That looks really good. The next thing we'll talk about is the dirt. There's a nice little dirt pathway that's kind of the middle point of this MOC. So over to the right you have the rocks, over to the left you have a little bit more foliage and trees and grass, but there's a nice little dirt patch in the bottom, which is just a nice balance of color all throughout the MOC. I always try to talk about, you know, the usage of color in MOCs and how builders can, you know, put color in strategic places to really make a MOC look nice. And I think that, you know, as you pan from the left side of the build to the right side, you have, you know, a lot of greens and even deep greens with the dark green. The middle is brown, then the right side is dark gray. I'm sure there's a more in-depth artistic term for this, but in general, I think there's just a very nice balance of color here. The dark brown pieces mixed in with the brown for the dirt also looks really nice. The final thing we'll discuss is the foliage. I think the nicest looking tree is the one to the furthest back, so we'll take a look at this. For something that you'd think you build pretty often and could nail down, building trees in Lego is not the most straightforward thing. Like, especially when it comes to the tree trunk, getting it to have a nice round shape while still implementing enough detail on the outsides of it to still make it look like a tree can often be a pretty difficult task for builders, but I think he does a pretty solid job here. I think the leaf placement also looks really good. Like the way the Lego leaf pieces are made, they're obviously very flat, so you have to get a little creative to make the trees look nice and full, like what you'd see in a forest. And I think he's done a pretty awesome job with that. Like, obviously that tree in the back looks really nice. It looks nice and round with some snot techniques built basically into the tree trunk. But then if you just look over the MOC in general, I think he has just a very nice, delicate balance of foliage kind of sprinkled around the entire build. It's very easy on something like this to just totally go overkill when it comes to your plant pieces. Like, you really want to use a bunch of them up, so you end up putting too many of them down. That does not appear to be the case with this build. It looks like the leaf pieces were very strategically placed to not only, you know, not be overkill, but to also kind of make sense with the flow of the build. Like, obviously there are the 2 densely populated areas with like foliage pieces on the left and the right, but then down the middle, that middle trail was just the mud. You know, you might see a few smaller leaf pieces, which just really makes sense in my mind when you're building a MOC like this. I could go on for quite a bit longer about this build because I think it looks so nice, but in short, this is just an almost perfect looking Endor MOC, might I say. Like, for this scale, for the techniques he's trying to employ, I think he really did an awesome job on this. The next MOC is Eclipse of Dathomir by EMazingbrix. This one was a really interesting one just because of not only the subject matter, like you can take one glance at this and see there's some pretty interesting things going along, but the first thing that drew my attention and made me say, oh, I'm definitely reviewing this for the MOC showcase is this door right here. Look at this door. How cool is this technique? I'm not even going to try to begin to figure out how he accomplished this. There's obviously some interesting techniques going on behind this assembly right here, but it looks awesome. The pattern that's created using these bracket pieces and cheese slopes kind of wrapping around this 3x3 inverted dish, and then the 2x2 boat stud to cap it all off. It honestly is very reminiscent of like a turbo tank wheel. Like, I wonder if he kind of drew inspiration from that in order to create this. Nonetheless, that is an awesome looking design, so well done on that right off the bat. It looks like the story of this build, you know, we have a pretty terrified clone officer here. It looks like some sort of Zabrick, could be Savage, who knows, came to their base and just wrecked shop, like chopped that one guy up in the back. The guy in the trench there is also knocked out. The guy up top is exploding. I'm going to assume that's actually just from a non-related incident. I don't know, he was like microwaving his lunch with the foil still wrapped around it, and it still blew up. I'd love to think that even in Star Wars, microwaves can't handle foil being put into them. Anyways, this is such a just cool, interesting looking build. Obviously, the door looks very nice. The story is one, I mean, you can read up on it if you click on the link. I didn't read up on it, but just the visual of this is pretty just hilarious, honestly. There's lots of small little details around this build that I think are worth noting. For example, this little communications device sitting on the table right here. At first when I saw this, I was like, oh man, is that like someone's hand that got cut off but it's still connected to it? But my guess is actually that it's probably some sort of antenna that's connected to it, which is a really good idea for something like that. That's actually pretty ingenious, honestly. I love that. Over to the backside near the dead bloody clone on the ground, there's one of those window pieces kind of tucked into the lever base piece, which is just such a nice technique. Like, I love when builders do that. It's a good way to make those holographic screens that we see in Star Wars. And then finally up top, there's also just a nice little satellite build. I love that he wrapped the, looks like the Indiana Jones whip around it just to give it a little bit more detail, like it's really being consumed by the nature around it. And there's also even the smaller stick piece kind of tucked in there. There's also just something so nice about the angle of the architecture in this build. Like, obviously there's a ton of mud on the ground. The landscape is mostly mud, but the way he's built, you know, whatever this installment is into it at this 45-degree angle while also having the circle intersect it from the side is just a really nice technique, a really nice way to make your build look more dynamic. Like, this build could have easily just, you know, been straightforward, but just integrating that one little angle, I think if you're a MOC builder, you have to really appreciate that. All in all, this is just a fun little build. I always try to go out of my way to point out builds that are small but packed with details and unique techniques, and this is one of the best examples of that. The final MOC we're going to take a look at is this insane UCS scale TIE Fighter. This thing is just, oh my god. The builder is named Cereal Eating Builder. His link's in the description, so go check him out. But this was such an interesting MOC for me to check out today because I feel like literally right before this, I was just, I don't know what I was doing. I was online looking at Lego stuff, of course, and I came across a photo of the UCS Tie Fighter, the most recent one, and I was like, huh, maybe that thing hasn't aged very well. Like, in this era of Jarek TIE Fighters, you know, these nice, smooth, round, spherical looking cockpits, I think the UCS TIE Fighter, if they wanted to take another crack at it today, they could probably come up with a better, more round, seamless looking solution to it. And then I saw this and I was just like, okay, wow, that is a UCS scaled TIE Fighter. For one, the wings, they're smooth completely on both sides, which is awesome. That's something I understand why Lego, they didn't try to do it. Like, Lego doesn't try to run away from studs or anti-studs like some of us MOC builders might try to do. But the fact that he's implemented this nice snot detail at such a large scale is just incredible. It's kind of the Jarek technique, but scaled up. I don't even know if it's correct to call it the Jarek technique. I think people might have been doing that before him. Nonetheless, that technique specifically allows you to get a very nice profile for your TIE Fighter wings. It looks slim, and of course it's not on both sides. That's one of the main draws to it. But if we go to this next photo, we get an up close look at the cockpit, and I think that's really where this thing shines. This is such an interesting and cool technique to try to get the spherical shape of a TIE Fighter cockpit, and I love it. Some people might have a problem with the gaps between it. I'm not one to really gripe over gaps. Like, the shape here looks so awesome. I can forgive some gaps between these sections, but this is incredible. Like, this is I don't know if I've seen a TIE Fighter cockpit at this scale that looks more round and just well shaped than this one. This is just absolutely incredible. I love how everything flows still around those basic pieces like the 8x8 printed dish on the top and then the 8x8 cockpit piece on the front. But he just did an outstanding job at getting the shaping of this cockpit to work out. It looks so nicely spherical. I think those red lipstick pieces at the bottom to represent the lasers also looks pretty cool. Another really nice thing about this build are these little sections that basically connect the wings to the cockpit. I feel this is something on many TIE Fighters that people just outright get wrong or don't do a good enough job at, and considering how big this thing is, considering just the scale of this ship, I think he really knocked this out of the park. Like, I would love to see a breakdown of this and just see how, you know, the structural integrity of this MOC is maintained by having this nicely detailed connector section and obviously these massive wings which are done with bricks rather than plates, so the weight on those have to be, you know, significantly heavier than the wings on the UCS Tie Fighter. Similarly to the front section, the back section on this MOC also does not disappoint. The shaping of this is also just so freaking good. I love these reverse 1x3 slopes here that are basically just wrapping around in a circular pattern, and then with the cheese slopes on the inside. Like, this is just outstanding. I really don't think I can put into words just how satisfying it is to see something like this as a builder. Like, I'm not really one to go out of my way to build upscaled models. Like, if I get an upscaled model, it's probably just a UCS set, but I don't necessarily care to have, you know, upscaled models of other people's creations in my collection. Like, I feel that money is much better served by me by building something that's minifig scale. But this is one that I consider building. Like, I would actually consider switching out my UCS TIE Fighter display with something like this because it looks so good, because the techniques are just so nice all throughout this thing. Like, this is, I think, truly a work of Lego art. One other nice bit of detail that he included in these wing sections are the sign pieces, those triangular sign pieces that he has basically wedged between all of the lines on the TIE Fighter cockpit. That just looks really good. It's a cool usage of those pieces. It's so nice how those pieces kind of all settle into perfectly fit into that shape. The last thing I want to say about this build is the instructions are actually available for free. So if you wanted to build one of these on your own, this guy has so graciously put out step-by-step building instructions for free, which is just so awesome. Like, what a cool thing for him to do. I don't think this will be a project that I'd attempt anytime soon, but it's definitely tempting seeing this just nicely detailed cockpit on this large scale TIE Fighter, especially just looking at the UCS one, seeing how much nicer the cockpit and wings looks on this one. That might have to be the move someday.